So if you're a little curious to know more about this pink-haired person from down under, and you'd like to know what videos I have upcoming between now and the end of the year, then stick around. Welcome back, my crafty friends, and if you're new here, a huge welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. Today I want to bring you behind the scenes of Told by Thread and introduce you to who I am and a bit more about my practice. If you're not into little personal introductions, totally fine. Feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter and I'll list the timestamp in the description below. Otherwise, hello. I'm Jordan. I'm an artist and designer based in Australia on Gadigal land, which you would probably know better as Sydney. And as such, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I'm currently working in this beautiful artist-run studio space. This is the 5th space that I've worked from, and these spaces have always become a home away from home for me. So working in spaces like this, you get the best of both worlds. You can work for yourself at your own pace, your own timetable, but you also get the social interaction and the community of a workplace. And you're surrounded by like-minded people. If you saw my studio tour previously, I'll link it above and below as well, then you'll have noticed that I have quite a homey style to my studio setup. And it just feels really comfortable and inviting, and it's just a lovely place to work in and somewhere I look forward to being. But on a real note, it's also, these spaces have always been like a nice stable space for me amongst some really uncertain housing over the last several years. If you didn't know, Sydney is hugely expensive. We've always been in the top 10 list of most expensive cities in the world. And I also live with some chronic conditions which have been quite disabling for decades. Unfortunately, they're not really considered disabilities as such, so I kind of fall through the cracks with a lot of support systems. So I've had to be quite creative with my everyday living and getting by day to day. So working for myself allows me to manage my condition depending on the ups and downs, and that obviously comes at a cost, literally. So one of the other creative solutions I've had is I've been a professional pet sitter on the side of my other work that I've been doing freelance. It's a great way to have somewhere to stay and you get to hang out with really beautiful pets. But more recently, I was doing the stealth van life. If you're not familiar with that, it is fitting out a van into your little home and then you just live very quietly and unobtrusively in the city. And you move around a lot so you don't attract too much attention. And I absolutely loved my van. I'm going to share some images if I haven't already. I'd quite often go camping for a few days every month, which was really amazing. Unfortunately, I had the inevitable van life car crash just over a year ago, so I was really lucky actually that it was just mainly a front end collision, so all my fit out in the back was largely intact. So I was able to strip out my van and put everything into storage, and it's just been sitting there paying rent on that for over a year while I try and save up for a new van. But this year has been really hard on so many levels, like it has for a lot of people. But I'm determined to save up and get back to van life because I really, really enjoyed it, even though it came as a creative solution to a really difficult life situation. It has its plus sides and I really loved it. So aside from all that, I love being creative and I trained as a graphic designer, which I still do my freelance work as that. But I've always loved being crafty. If I can make it rather than buy it, 9 times out of 10 I will. About 10 years ago, I taught myself embroidery and I've been in a couple of group shows and then I had a solo show as well one year. Despite that love of embroidery, I hated sewing machines. I did try to get into sewing about 12 years ago and I just kind of sucked at it, so I just abandoned it. Then 2 years ago, I started watching The Sewing Bee and it just clicked. And that's when I realized I'm a visual learner and watching people do something really helps me understand and learn it and get inspired. And so that was it. So I tried again. I borrowed a machine and off I went. More recently, I've taken up knitting and I've made loads of dishcloths, cushions, blankets, but I'm yet to finish an actual garment. I'm very, very close though. I still really love embroidery, and I'm now more obsessed with cross stitch in particular, and I've started converting a lot of my paintings into cross stitch patterns. I really love trying new ways of displaying embroidery and incorporating it into clothing, just get out of the hoop basically. So these 2 patterns will be released towards the end of the year, if not earlier. So in future, I'm planning to do at least 1 large pattern release each year. I'm also really keen to do a stitch along with all of you, and I'm thinking sort of a small project to offer for free, broken into maybe 4 parts. I have an idea which I would love to work out the technical aspects of, and that is recording like a slow TV, sort of quiet body doubling video type thing, where you can play the video and stitch along with me, or just have it in the background. Okay, so I was getting a bit ahead of myself, but that segues nicely into this next chapter, which is talking about some of my bigger picture plans. So my goal with Told by Thread originally was to combine my art and design skills with my crafty interests and share it with like-minded people. So that all kind of initially came about because I saw a gap in the embroidery market. There's a lot of beginner small projects and then really massive complicated ones. There's nothing really in the intermediate sort of range. So I thought that was a great opportunity to share my art and
1 eternity later.
So I've always been drawn to colours and patterns, as you can tell, and just recently I started painting a bit more seriously again, and so I wanted to combine some of those artworks, my embroidery, with my newfound love of sewing. Really any excuse to sew. Another big part of Told by Thread that I originally dreamed up in the beginning was designing for fabric. I've done this in the past just for myself and then for a small Canadian label called Stella Marie. So the name Told by Thread sort of feels like a perfect fit because embroidery tells stories with thread and sewing is self-expression and identity told with thread, and the other original name I came up with has already been taken, so Told by Thread it is. So expect to see some fabric collections in the future along with cross-stitch stitch-along and an intermediate size annual pattern. I've got loads of other ideas as well, so stick around for the ride. So now to the meaty part of this video and the last chapter, and that is what is coming up on this channel between now and the end of December. If you haven't seen my spring thread plans video from last week, go check that out. Put a link in the description below as well. So I've been doing some rethinking and planning around how I operate this whole business. So as you can see, I've got a pretty new wall planner, and I've just taken on the lessons that I've learned in the last couple of weeks to try and tweak this system a bit, and I think it'll be even better again once I get to summer. I'm also aware that my social media is pretty dead at the moment. I'm working on a sustainable system, but yeah, if you've been in this situation and you have any tips, then I'd love to know. The apron dress progress is very slow, but it will happen. Once my new schedule and workflow is sort of down pat, I can go back to doing embroidery in the evenings, plus my knitting. Okay, next week is the teddy dress sew along. Then after that, I have a tutorial for a quilted dust cover for sewing machine. I'm going to attempt to sew that in 2 hours, which is bonkers, but should be quite funny. After that, I'm sharing some of my favourite fabric stores and sources to get fabric. Then after that is the Winnie Pants sew along. So the week after that, I'm going to be sharing some of the indie pattern designers that I'd like to try. And that's inspired by a series by Steph Sohn, where she's gone through some international pattern designers that you may not have heard of. Then I'm going to be doing a little op shopping adventure. I'm sort of still deciding between 2 suburbs at the moment, so that's to be decided. After that, I've got a very interesting sew along, which is going to be me attempting to self-draft a drop yoke skirt, which after my previous self-drafting is a bit daunting, but I have a plan and I'm hopeful. And then the last sew along for this spring segment is going to be the Cosette dress. And then of course at the end of all that, I'll be wrapping up with a review of all my spring makes and then showing you my summer thread plans. So these are all pretty well locked in at the moment, unless there's any major curveballs that come my way. So I hope that was interesting and you're excited about the upcoming content. I know I am. It would be really lovely if you could like and subscribe to my channel. If you enjoy these videos, you might like to consider buying me a coffee over at my Ko-fi or Ko-fi account. And I'll see you next week.